going today, everybody? Eddie Kernan for Rexylab. Welcome to the Guitarmory. Man, if I had a time machine to where I could go back to 1982 and tell 12-year-old me that one day I would have an Iron Maiden Steve Harris Fender Precision bass, I have no idea what 12-year-old me would say. He'd probably say make room in that time machine, because I'm going with you now. All my big heroes, and I have 3 big bass heroes, they have a Fender signature bass. It all started with this one back in 1982. So while I go through this thing, I'm going to tell you the story of how an Iron Maiden album and a Copenhagen hat changed my life forever. It's important to note a couple things here, and the first one is that this is the 3rd version of an Iron Maiden bass done by Fender. The very first one was made in Japan, and it wasn't a signature series, it was more a tribute bass, had a wine red pickguard, couple other things. The next one is actually the one that I had always kind of chased after. The Mexican one, which is what I have, it's got the Duncan Steve Harris signature pickup in it, and supposedly it's very authentic to what he's playing right now. But in 1982, it didn't say West Ham United Football Club on it. It was sparkle blue. So I'm still on the hunt for one of those, and if anybody's got one that they want to let go, leave something in the comments. It's supposed to have Rotosound Steve Harris flat wounds. And these things, my God, 50 to 110. I like 40 to 100. So, you know what? I don't think 666 is the number of the beast in this case. I think that it's going to be 110. As I disassemble this thing, let's talk a little bit about how Iron Maiden changed my life forever. Because, you know what? I wouldn't be the person I am today were it not for this record, Number of the Beast. Back in 1982, when I was going to school, I was this awkward, dorky little kid. I had no social skills, no nothing. And everybody who was anybody had this painter's cap that looked like a can of Copenhagen. I wanted one so bad. The thing probably cost about $3.50. But you know what? I was the oldest of 5, and we were of extremely limited resources. As such, I had absolutely no way of getting said hat. A good friend of mine at the time got one of these hats, and I was so excited because, you know, I could live vicariously through his hat ownership and sit there and go like, oh my goodness, you know, maybe one day we'd be sitting there and he'd be like, hey man, hand me my hat, and I'd get to touch it. Maybe even he'd get tired of it, and maybe I could like trade him something for it, you know, whatever. And then one day the unthinkable happened. This friend of mine looks at me and says, you ever hear of a band called Iron Maiden? Well, you know, I was 12. I was in the 6th grade, and I didn't realize that lying would always catch up to you, so I did. I lied and I said, hey, of course I've heard of Iron Maiden. I'm a man of the world. I go to Surprise Lake Middle School, after all. Why would I have not heard of Iron Maiden? Why do you ask? And he said, well, because this guy has an Iron Maiden record and he wants to trade me for my Copenhagen hat. Like I said, I lied. I totally lied. I had no idea who Iron Maiden is, but this is the hat we're talking about. I immediately went on the offensive. I talked to my friend and I told him, sweet Jesus, no matter what you do, do not trade your hat for that Iron Maiden record. Don't do it, man. Don't do it. They suck. And he was like, you think so? And I was like, not only do I think so, I know so. And he was like, oh, okay, well, I guess I won't do it then. I breathed a sigh of relief and went home, a little bit more relaxed. The hat was safe. Everything was going to be okay. A couple days later, I went down to his house and he held up an Iron Maiden Number of the Beast record and said, "Hey, check it out." My heart sank because I knew that the hat was gone. Well, he looked at me and said, "Hey man, let's listen to it." And I really was just so forlorn over this whole excruciating lack of Copenhagen hat that I was just bitter, and I was like, why? They suck. Remember, I lied. I had no idea who they were. I'd never heard them. And he said, well, you can do whatever you want, but I'm going to listen to this record. And you know what? I had no friends. I had nowhere to go. I had nothing better to do. So I stayed, but I vowed that I was going to hate Iron Maiden with the white-hot intensity of 1,000 suns, because you know what? My beloved hat, that wasn't even mine, was gone. Back in 1982, there were no CDs, there were no MP3s, there was no listen to it on your computer. It was a record, a cassette, or an 8-track. Mercifully, this was a record. But, weirdly enough, it was a little confusing to look at and figure out which side was what. So we figured that side 2 was actually side 1. And weirder than that, side 2 of The Number of the Beast actually starts with the title track, The Number of the Beast. And it opened up with that just deep reverberated "Woe to you, O earth and sea." And then all of a sudden guitars. It was like nothing I ever heard before. And you know what? When we got to the end of the second side we listened to, we flipped it over and listened to it again, and then again. By the time we had gone through the entire album 3 times, my friend looked over at me with a little smirk on his face, and he was like, I thought they sucked. Because by that point, I was like completely engrossed in the just masterful artwork of Derek Riggs on the cover of this thing. You know, well, what could I do? I was like, I lied. This started a massive series of events that led me to everything that you see here right now. So this friend of mine and I, what we wound up doing was we made a little listening station underneath the stairs in his family room, and the door to get in was just too tight for an adult to comfortably fit through. And that was fine by us. We moved his stereo in there. We moved his records in there. We even had a Hustler centerfold that supposedly was of a girl that had 3 boobs, that it said not airbrushed, and she signed her name like, "Are you man enough for me? XOXO, I'm a slutsky." You know, this is like our little den of badassery, as badass as this 12-year-old had ever been in his life anyway. And that was when my friend looked over at me and said something that would change my life forever. You know what, man? We should learn how to play. This hit me like a freaking ton of bricks. What? We could do that? Are you kidding? Are you serious? Yes, please. My friend wanted to play guitar. Of course he did, you know. So I decided that I would play the drums, because I certainly didn't have enough self-esteem to even think about being a singer. Man, what a super clean example of a bassist is. Oh, hey, look, check it out. If you look in the reflection, you can see the Power Slave tapestry reflecting. Walking home in the twilight that was 12 years old in Western Washington, lamenting the fact that all of my rock and roll dreams would never come true because I couldn't get a freaking hat and I didn't know how much drum sets were, but I was sure of one thing: they were more than a hat. I got depressed. And the closer I got to our house, the more depressed I got. And when I finally got home, my mom was in the kitchen cooking dinner, and she looked over and said, "Oh, hi. How's it going? What's going on, honey?" And I didn't really know what to say, so I just said, "Not much," and I started heading to my room. So it didn't take long for my mom to figure out that something was really bothering me. Something quite serious in my little 12-year-old world. So she said, nope, stop right there, mister. What's going on? And I said, I really don't want to talk about it. And she said, that's too bad, because guess what? You're going to talk about it. What's going on? Now, I don't know what she thought I was going to say, but I want a drum set, and I know we can't afford one, was more than likely not one of those things. I told her I knew we couldn't afford it. And then I told her that I'd get over it, but I was sad. Well, that must have tore my mom apart, because she went and she took the only thing that she had of value, which was an accordion that her parents got her when she was a little kid, and she sold it for $50, and she gave me the 50. Not only that, but my sister's best friend, her older brother, was this really cool kid that everybody called Wolf, and he played the drums, and he had an old drum set because he had just got a new one, and so he gave me his old drum set, and it was a hunk of crap, but man, it was mine. Then my mom found a way to get me drum lessons for about a year. I was the most uncoordinated, gawky, weird, out-of-place little kid that you could ever hope to have the sorry misfortune of meeting until that year of drum lessons and Iron Maiden. My coordination improved. My self-confidence improved. Started growing my hair longer. Started developing some self-esteem. I have learned more indirectly from Iron Maiden music about self-esteem than I have from every other source that I've ever encountered in my life put together times 10. I found myself hearing voices when I would listen to Iron Maiden, specifically The Number of the Beast, in particular the song The Prisoner. Now, what did these voices say? Did they say, go do terrible things and behead the neighborhood kittens and such? No. No, it's just one thing over and over. You are just fine. Anybody who doesn't agree can fuck the hell off, because you're just fine. And you know what? It didn't have an English accent, so it wasn't one of the guys from Iron Maiden. I was thinking, well, who could it be? Eddie? You know, Eddie doesn't talk. It matters not, because I still heard these words of encouragement about, you know, how I was just fine and I'd be okay. Everything would be just dandy. Not a problem. At this particular point, you could almost say that the rest is history. Except there's a fun little epilogue to this story. And we'll get to it in a second. All right, I got her all strung up. A little buzzy here. That is showing flat though. Could it be that I need to come up even more? Wow! So that's higher action than I would normally have. The neck is pretty much straight as an arrow, and this thing is clacky as clacky can be. That's pretty cool. Okay, well, that explains the clack. So, yeah, wow. And this thing is a workout to play. Jesus, Steve Harris. I thought I had respect for you before. That's it for the bass. But if you stuck around for the story, there's just a little bit more to how it ends. I actually have that original record that my friend back in the day traded. And here it is. Sadly, my little brothers and sisters broke it. And it is unplayable. But that doesn't matter because it hangs on a frame in my bedroom, and it's the first thing I see when I wake up. And it reminds me constantly where I came from and all that I've accomplished to keep me going with how much further I can go before I'm done with this crazy thing we call life. In 2018, I went to see the Legacy of the Beast tour. And when they played the Number of the Beast, I most certainly heard those voices again. But instead of saying, "You're just fine," now they've said, "You've got a whole lot to do, so get with it." And I did. I've been through a few things in my life. I've battled some demons and things like that. And right as I thought that it was time to check out and maybe everything was just like as far as it was going to go, I came up with this idea to take my love of guitar, bass, drums, music, everything, and put it together to make the world a little bit better of a place. And it started right here with this Iron Maiden record. And that's why it's absolutely no mistake that my logo is red with a white outline. Iron Maiden colors, baby. You know it. But there's one last cool little thing. In 2006, I was out in Colorado with a couple friends of mine. One of them I actually taught how to play guitar, and now he teaches music at a community college. The other was his brother. We went to see Dweezil Zappa do the first run of Zappa Plays Zappa. And as we were sitting in the kid who I taught how to play guitar's basement studio, I sat there and looked around and went, "Can you imagine? Like, we wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for an Iron Maiden record and a Copenhagen hat." My buddy's older brother looked at me and said, "What are you talking about?" It's like, "Don't tell me you've lived next door to me since 1980. and you've never heard this story. He hadn't, so I told him. And at the end, he was like, that is the coolest thing I've ever heard. Well, we went our separate ways. I went back to my day job, deep sea diver in the Gulf of Mexico. And one day I went and there was a package waiting for me at the post office from Willow, Alaska. I was like, what in the world's going on here? I don't know anybody in Alaska. And I was like, wait a minute, my friend Matt. So I went home and I opened it up. And guess what was inside? That's right. I finally got my freaking Copenhagen hat. So I gave him a call. And he was like, hey man, what's up? And I was like, I think you know what's up. And he said, could you please be a little more specific? I don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, I got the hat, man. And he was like, oh, freaking thank God. You know how hard it was for me not to tell you? He was like, I got it for selfish reasons, though, for you. And I was like, do tell. And he said, well, man, you know, here's the thing, is that I really did think that that story was cool. And I remembered those hats. And I was like, man, I wish that I had a story that cool. So I decided to inject myself into yours. So I decided to get you that hat. And I went looking, and those hats are hard to find. I would have been happy finding any old hat, any old beat up hat like that, but I actually found one that was new old stock. And the way he put it to me was, it's never been worn, it has never been headed. I'd tell people the story, I'd show them the hat, I'd let them hold the hat, but nobody was permitted to put the hat on their head. So you are the first. And I was so touched, and I got to tell you, I look positively stupid in this thing. What was I thinking? But you know what? This hat hangs right next to the Iron Maiden record to let me know, in addition to, look at how far I've come. But there are people out there right now that are thinking about me that, you know, the furthest thing from my mind. So it's a nice reminder that, you know what, I'm loved. It's really pretty much it, except for one last thing about those voices that I'd always heard. When I went back and I saw the Legacy of the Beast, I started to get an idea whose voice I actually heard. Pretty sure it was mine. From now. Trying to tell 12-year-old me that I was just fine. So maybe I did develop a time machine after all. And if you need any further evidence of just how awesome Iron Maiden is,
the message from that goes out is that it doesn't matter whether you're male, female, Muslim, Christian, Catholic, Jewish, it doesn't matter. If you're a Maiden fan, you're an Iron Maiden fan. You're part of one fucking world and one family, my friend.
I was like, I knew it! I absolutely knew it. And that right there is why, while I'm not a religious man, I pray at the altar of Iron Maiden. This has been Eddie Kernan for Rexylab, making the world a better place for my inner 12-year-old, one amazing bass guitar at a time.